So the first foundational philosophy in Hard IQ is loving what is. If there was one way to sum up this entire work, it's the art of expanding your emotional energetic range through the path of accepting who you are as you are without making any part of your experience wrong. So you drop in to relaxed, unconditional love for self, which then allows that to be available for other. But you can't love another to any degree larger than you can self-appreciate and accept yourself. I know we've all heard that. We've opened up Christmas crackers or we've looked at cookie wisdom and it says you can't love another until you love yourself. It's trite in today's personal development arena. And yet there is a law of energetic couple dynamic that basically says that emotionally you can only be available to the degree that you are available to yourself. You cannot offer anything more to your partner than you can give to yourself. So there is a primary relationship with self that is essential. And as you work and grow that, it improves your relationship. Next one. The purpose of relationship is to enjoy. Yes, to enjoy it. Sometimes I hear that and people go, the purpose of relationship and what I get back is to enjoy it. As if it's the most sad, depressing, hopeless truth in the world. And it's interesting because in order to speak to this reality, we need to first define what joy is. And it's so fascinating when I ask people, what does it mean to be joyful? It's so curious how many different definitions of joy there is. So in order for you to understand why the purpose of relationship and your entire life is joy, let me first describe what joy is from this work's perspective. Joy is not happiness. Joy is not a state which you reach that is on an emotional scale where depression, hopelessness, bad feelings, sadness is here, and joy is somewhere up here, and it's better to be up here than it is to be down there. That is not joy. Joy is the awakened moment where you relax into your own goodness, where you suddenly realize in that present moment of now, and you can wake up to it and you can fall asleep to it, but it's a moment by moment realization that you drop through relaxation and safety into goodness, your own intrinsic goodness, where you feel this infinite possibility of just explosive bliss, but it could be deep sadness, it could be anger, it could be power, it could be worry. But the joy comes from being present to whatever is moving. The joy is an emergent quality of presence to the now moment. Joy is your witnessing while feeling. It's the embodied awareness that is created when you're willing to be with what is, which means you can be enjoying your sadness, you can be enjoying your anger, you can be enjoying your rage, your jealousy, your openness and your closure. That all of it is joyful, that it's not a state, it's a present emergent quality that holds all states. So when I say the purpose of your relationship is joy, does that make better sense? Yeah, the purpose of your relationship is to hold it all. It's to hold it all. To be the container and the contained. To be the container, to be that expresses and that which receives. It's all of it. And to bring your presence to it, to bring your light to it, to bring your goodness to the moment. That's what Heart Intelligence awakens. Is that in every single one of you, no exception, you are good at the core. And you may have developed layers of doubt and disconnect and pain and trauma, wounding, neglect. Ultimately, though, beneath it all, whatever you feel is shadow and dark, beneath it all, there's pure goodness connected right to the light, right through to the ground. And your job is to come from that place and infuse your entire life experience from that place. And to infuse your relationship from that place. When you do that, everything in your life changes, and you can feel the same worries, you can feel the same anxieties, you can have the same triggers, the same pain body activations, and it feels completely different because it's wired through your heart, not through your pain. Joy comes from letting what moves move. Pain comes from resisting what wants to move. That's the essence of depression. Depression is not a disease. It's the absence of allowing movement to move. It's the absence of emotion. It's your resistance to feeling that feels bad, not feeling itself. I can pretty much... Every single one of you has had an experience of feeling a lot. And if you felt the feeling was bad, it's because you thought that feeling wasn't okay. It's the judgment that feels bad, not the feeling itself. You allow sadness to move, it will feel wonderful. You allow anger to really move, unfiltered, without the judgment, it feels amazing. Nothing feels bad intrinsically. It's your resistance to feeling it that feels bad. So, loving what is and knowing really what joy is the key to your healing and awakening. The problem is two things have occurred in our life to make that very, very difficult. There are two forms of wounding that we receive. Intrusive wounding is the sort of wounding that occurs when something was present that shouldn't have been present. Maybe we were interfered with. There was sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse. Something was said, something was done, something energetically, physically, emotionally occurred at a time when we were wide open, and it smashed the container of our safety. And we've had to now create walls and certain strategic ways to defend ourselves in the world so that we can be in the world functionally. But we're damaged. We're not damaged, we're at the core good, but our container is damaged. We confuse the container with us, so we think we're bad and damaged. Nobody here is damaged. Some of your containers are ruptured. Good news, you can seal them when you connect to this piece that I'm speaking to. So that's the first type of wounding. But you know what? When you look at the cases of abuse, it is quite prevalent. There's a lot of people who've been abused. But, most people are, if you look at it statistically in the Western world, although there's a lot of abuse, I would still say the majority of people have not suffered invasive abuse. They were spared that particular trauma. I'm just curious, could you raise a hand if you were abused invasively, sexually, emotionally, physically in your childhood? Could you just raise your hand if that's the case? Great, so look around. You can see that keep your hands raised if it's true. I'm not exposing you or putting you on the spot. I'm just showing the room that there are some who have and some that haven't. So now let's talk about the second group, those that haven't. Because they have been equally wounded, but it has nothing to do with invasive abuse. The second form of abuse is so subtle that if you ask them if it was abuse, they would often say no. Because it's a neglect. It's not being felt, tuned into, and seen, got, appreciated. It's being born into an emotional void where our primary caregivers, our parents, weren't able to be in their hearts to create this warm, safe container. We may have been fed, we may have been sheltered, we may have, had toilet paper to wipe our ass. But were we really seen, got, acknowledged, uplifted, encouraged, challenged in a healthy way, loved unconditionally, and brought up in an emotionally rich and diverse, accepting field where all of it was okay, where you could be your full self. You could be as big as you like. You could be as small as you like. You could be as feminine or as masculine. That all of what naturally wanted to move was held in a loving yes space. Most of us did not receive that. And if we didn't, we were not, it's not like they, in terms of the parents, neglected you, but your heart was neglected. Do you understand what I'm saying? And when the heart is neglected, what it does is it becomes independent, because it doesn't feel like it can have its needs met because they weren't met. And therefore in life, we create independence. And these people go on to be very successful often, very self-reliant, very much, I'm okay, I'm cool. And they can't even identify their own needs. When you ask them, what do you need? I'm okay, I'm doing okay, I don't know. It's almost a foreign concept to have them. It's weak because it challenges their independence. So neglect is not something that was there, it's something that wasn't there, which is why it's so mystifying and so hard to navigate the confusing swamp of finding our emotional truth when we are in that category. So we are dealing with two traumas that have occurred, both equal in value. It's not better or worse, but both have an impact on relationship, and they both have a dynamic impact in very different ways. But the key thing is relationship heals them both, if done right. That's the rub. Relationships can wound the abuse even deeper if done wrong. So this weekend is about showing the way that works. So it keeps you on track to helping you heal rather than re-trigger the abuse that was there, either to increase the neglect or violate the wound. When we're wounded by these two different qualities, whether it's an invasive wound or a neglectful wound, what happens is that we don't feel safe. That's the result. And we go out in the world feeling unsafe, and we then begin to close, and we start to disconnect from ourselves and other. But because that disconnect feels bad, we start to develop strategies that cover and distract ourselves from feeling how bad we feel and how disconnected we feel and how unsafe we feel. So this is the order. Wound, trauma happens, whether invasive or neglect. We feel bad, disconnected, and alone. We can only tolerate that for so long, so then we cover the disconnect with a wall or a perimeter, a defensive system that keeps us distracted from our feelings, but more importantly, it keeps who we are in, and it keeps others out. So it prevents others from really seeing us, because if we think we're bad and not okay, because that's the conclusion we make, by the way. A child who begins to feel bad ends up believing that they are bad because they confuse feeling bad with being bad. That's just what happens early in life. They can't differentiate. They don't have an ego to separate self and other. So if they've been wounded through a neglect or through a trauma, they feel bad, but if they feel it for so long, they begin to build an identity around it. They start to think, shit, I must be bad because I feel bad so often. That just must be who I am. Because in those formative years, children are building an identity. So if you are feeling bad frequently enough or neglected and you feel your needs aren't being met, sooner or later you just either go numb, which is the case of the people who get neglected, they go numb, or they become very, very in pain and very wounded and very sad and alone and desperate. Now, either one of those, it just isn't tolerated for too long. So we start to develop strategies, and we start to develop this wall, this perimeter, this defensive mechanism. It is very sophisticated. It's brilliant. And this is not something to make wrong. You need to fall in love with your defensive mechanism. Because this thing, it's genius. You know, if we didn't have this wall, this perimeter, we would in fact, I think, spontaneously combust with joy. And because if you could feel the love that was available right here, right now, oh my God, you would just burst. So the fact is, you're all pretty contained right now, which means your stewards are working to keep your nervous system in a state of functioning without it going into a crazy space. So it serves you. So Stuart is this perimeter that has been built to protect us from feeling too much, from letting others in. So it prevents us from really receiving love. Because if we were to open to receive love, we would have to open to feeling our pain. So it protects us in that way. And it also protects us from really sharing our full truth, to showing who we really are. Because if we were to share who we really are, it's highly risky. And this is built in, analogy I would give you is a rabbit or a deer. Do you know what happens when you shine headlights onto a deer, if you see it on a road? Yeah, it goes very still, which is not really good for the deer when a car is coming towards it. But it's very good for a deer in its natural environment when predators are trying to look for it, and to be seen means to be eaten for lunch. So the deer has a built-in Stuart that says, if I am seen, I will go still to make me go invisible, because when I'm invisible, predators will pass past me and they won't see me and I won't be eaten. So it's a survival mechanism. And although we don't live in a jungle, we live in an emotionally threatening world where we're constantly feeling threatened around our connection and our sense of self and our identity, and whether we're loved and accepted and judged and all the rest of it. So this Stuart causes us to freeze and paralyze us inside, so we can't be ourselves. We just can't be relaxed and be here. Authentic and real and present to the moment. So we've spoken about loving what is. The purpose of relationship is to enjoy it, defining what joy is. And the third one is you are intrinsically good. And so is your partner, shadows and all. And we've also touched on the fourth, which I've mentioned, but I'm going to make it very clear as a statement. There are no such things as negative emotions. Now, let's just create a caveat here, because I don't believe in absolute truths or black and white. So when I say that, there's always a piece that goes, yeah, but. So let me say what the yeah, but is so you can relax in the reality of the whole truth around it, which is when emotions are allowed to move through the heart, there is no negativity and no toxic nature to those emotions. When emotions come through a closed heart and come through a repressed system that is disconnected from the heart, they can come out funky and they can become very toxic. So, for example, love is a natural emotion, agreed? Do I love what is? There's a fly. Love is a natural emotion. If you repress love, it turns into possessiveness. It becomes needy when we don't allow ourselves to love freely. It turns into need. Jealousy is a natural, envy is a natural emotion, but if you repress it, it can turn into jealousy. Fear is a natural emotion, but when you repress it, it can turn into panic, which is not healthy. Anger is very natural, but if you repress it, it turns into rage or passive aggressiveness, not healthy. So every emotion, when naturally owned and connected to you, is beautiful, and there's no negative emotion. Sadness isn't negative, anger isn't negative, but a disconnected heart causes the emotion to come through a repressed energetic system that comes out either in a very passive way or a very rageful or uncontained way that can potentially be toxic. So when people talk about negative emotions, toxic emotions, that's what I refer to as toxic. But a lot of people will continue that label and in fact say things like sadness or anger or jealousy. In fact, they'll make all of it under a pile called negative. Like the top part of this range is positive and the bottom part is negative. And the problem with this is that if you start to become self-aware and you start to track your reality and you start to feel sad, what are you going to instantly try and do? That's not rhetorical, I was actually asking a question. If you're feeling sad and you have a judgment that sadness isn't okay, what will you do? Yeah? What will you try to do? Yeah, you'll try to be here. You'll think that this is better than this. You understand, right? Because you're saying, oh my God, I can't be here, I can't be here. I have to be happy. Let's do something. Let's maybe get in my body a little bit. Perhaps I need to tell myself a positive affirmation, or perhaps I need to tell myself I'm enough. Yes, that's it. I'm enough. I'm enough. I'm enough. Okay, I'm feeling better. I'm feeling better. This is good. This is good. Cool, that worked. But did it? All you've done is you've moved your state temporarily without healing or coming into self-acceptance at all. But here's the secret. If you feel this and you notice a judgment that this isn't okay, the thing to do is to love this, accept it, and this will happen. You suddenly realize that this is not better than this, but this can be so rich and joyful, and you don't even need to move. And in fact, when you do move, it moves automatically, and more importantly, sustainably. You get to move in a more sincere, real way to a place that feels authentically expanded, rather than jumping and then collapsing. Jumping and collapsing. Happy, 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 sad, sad, sad. Happy, 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 sad, sad, sad. Rather than